Okay, so we're going to continue here in section 2.5, talking about writing the equation of lines given some information. So in the previous problem, I gave you the slope and I gave you the a point and asked you to write an equation. We did one where we went to standard form, one where we went to slope intercept form, and so we're going to continue with that here. But in this case, we're told to write an equation of a line through the points negative 4, 3, and 5, negative 1. And it does say write our equation in standard form. So here's the issue that we run into. If we do that in this case, it doesn't matter if we try to use slope intercept form or point slope form. The one thing both of those have in common is slope. Again, may want to make a side note here. Before you can write an equation, you must have the slope. Well, I don't have a slope right now. But I do have 2 points, and we've talked about previously how we can take 2 points and use our slope formula to find the slope. And so we're going to start there. We're going to start by finding the slope. And again, the slope formula is y sub 2 minus y sub 1 over x sub 2 minus x sub 1. Hopefully you've had that memorized at this point and can do that. And so you're going to find the slope. We're going to have negative 1 minus 3 over 5 minus negative 4. And so negative 1 minus 3 is negative 4. 5 minus a negative 4 makes that 4 positive, so 5 plus 4 is 9. There's our slope that we're going to use to write our equation. Now, in our point slope form, we just need the slope, which we now have, and we need a point. And it doesn't matter which point we use. We can use either one, does not matter. So what I typically will do when I'm choosing which point to use, some people always want to say, well, I'm going to do the first point. And by all means, that is perfectly fine. I oftentimes will look at the numbers and try to use the one that's got all positive numbers if there is one. If there's not, I'll try to use the one that has the smaller numbers, if there is one that is significantly smaller than the others. Just because the smaller the numbers, the easier the work is. If it's all positive numbers, then when I put it in my formula, I don't have to worry about minus a negative. I can just say minus whatever that number is. And so there's just some little things there that I try to choose my point carefully. Now, in this case, both points are the numbers are fairly small. They both have a negative. So it's not really going to matter which point we use. So just for the sake of ease, I'm going to use the first point. Now remember that in our point slope form, it's y minus y sub 1 equals m times x minus x sub 1. Let me point out to you that this x sub 1, y sub 1 does not have to be the same as that x sub 1, y sub 1. It can be, doesn't have to be. Depending on which point you choose in the equation, you may not have the same x sub 1 and y sub 1. You may be using the 2's instead, x sub 2, y sub 2. So it doesn't matter. I've had people in the past that say, well, why did we not use the same x sub 1 and y sub 1? You can. Again, depending on what the numbers are, I may not always do that, but understand that you always can do that if you want to. So, in this case, we are going to use the same x sub 1 and y sub 1, and we're going to substitute that into our equation. So we have y minus 3 equals our slope, now that we found, is negative 4 over 9, times x minus the x value of that order pair, which is negative 4. Now, it says we're going to take this and write it in standard form. Now, there's a little more work here that has to happen, but the work is probably easier than if I were to ask you to go to standard into slope intercept form. So in standard form, we cannot have fractions. And so one of the things that we need to make sure we do is get rid of the fraction. And to do that, we'll multiply by the denominator of 9. And every term will get multiplied. So we'll multiply this y by 9 3 gets multiplied by 9, and then this fraction gets multiplied by 9. The x minus negative 4 does not get multiplied because everything on the right side of this equation is one term. It's the negative 4 over 9 times the stuff in parentheses. And so we only multiply each term. So when we do that, when we actually do this multiplication, we're going to have 9y minus 27, negative 3 times 9. And then this 9 we multiplied by and this 9 on the bottom of that fraction should cancel each other out. And so what it leaves us with is negative 4 times x plus 4. Now it is x plus 4 because that minus is negative. Well, now this looks a little easier. We can work with this a little bit easier now. And so to put it in standard form, we need the x term and the y term on the same side and constants on the other. So we do need to distribute this negative 4. So we have 9y minus 27 equals negative 4x minus 16. So I'm just going to rewrite that here. And now we want to move the x and y to the same side and constants to the other. So I'm going to add 4x to both sides of this equation. And in the same step, I am going to add the 27 to both sides. That way we move it to the right-hand side. And so when you simplify all that, we've got 4x plus 9y. The negative 27 plus 27 cancels. Negative 4x plus 4x cancels. And then we have negative 16 plus 27, which is going to be 11. And again, now this is in standard form. There's no fractions. The first number's not negative. And so there is our final answer. Again, if you have questions about that, if there's anything where I lost you, shoot me an email. Tell me which problem you're looking at, and I'll be glad to try to help you. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video, even back it up if you need to see the other one worked out, and try this one on your own. So I'll give you about 3 seconds to pause the video, and then I'll work it for you. Okay, so hopefully you paused the video and you've worked this one out. And so if you did, the very first thing you've got to do is you've got to find the slope, because it says we're going to write an equation of the line that goes through these points, and we're going to put that in standard form. And so to find the slope, we're going to use our slope formula, which says we're going to take y sub 2, which is negative 4, minus 2, which is the y sub 1, divided by 2 minus negative 3. And again, that minus and negative makes that positive. And so negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. 2 plus 3 is 5. And so that doesn't simplify, so there's our slope we're going to use. And now we're going to take that and one of the points, again, it doesn't matter which one, and write our equation. Again, I'm going to choose the first one. The numbers are a little bit smaller because you have the negative 3 instead of a negative 4. So I'm going to use that point. And so in our point slope form, we have y minus this y coordinate of 2. Nope. Yeah, that's right. And then that's equal to our slope, which is negative 6 over 5, times x minus the x coordinate of negative 3. Again, that minus and negative does make that a positive. Now, from here, we need to put this in standard form. And so, can't have fractions. So again, what we're going to do is multiply by the denominator. So we'll multiply everything by 5, every term by 5. And so when we do that, what should happen is we have 5y minus 10, so negative 2 times 5. And then this 5 we multiplied by and this 5 on the bottom of that fraction again cancel each other out. Now don't forget your negative there with the 6. So we have negative 6 times x plus 3. And now again we need to move the x term and y term to the same side and constants to the other. And so we'll start by distributing. And we'll have 5y minus 10 is equal to negative 6x minus 18. And then we'll add 6x. And in the same step, I am going to add 10 also. That way we move the constant to the other side. And so we end up with 6x plus 5y. Negative 10 plus 10 does cancel. Negative 6x plus 6x does cancel. And negative 8 plus 10 is, negative 18 plus 10 is negative 8. And so there is our equation in standard form. Now, let me tell you what's going to happen on a problem or two in your math lab. As you're working this homework by yourself, there's going to be a situation where you may end up with a negative for that first number. So I'm just going to make another problem up here. Let's say you put it in standard form, and you get negative 2x plus 3y equals 8. If you were to put that in as your standard form in your math lab, it's going to tell you it's wrong. And the reason is because this first number is negative. So the way we'll make it be positive is we'll just take everything and multiply it by negative 1. And that way all that's going to happen is the signs are going to change. So it becomes 2x minus 3y equals negative 8. This would be your standard form of that equation. If you put in the negative as that first number, it's going to tell you it's wrong. Okay, so be careful with that. Also on your math lab, it may ask you to put the numbers in like this, where it has a box with your x, and then your sign with your box with the y, and then a box for the last number. If it does ask you to put your answer in this way, this sign is already going to be correct. So if you were to take that and put it in, you would put in, change colors, you would put in 2 for this box. You would put in 3 for this box, even though it is a negative 3, because the sign's already there for you. And then you would put the negative in with that constant term. So you'd put in negative 8 in this case. And so that's how you would put your numbers in the boxes. The first number better always be positive. The second number, the sign is already going to be there if it gives you the boxes like this. And then for the last number, if it has a negative, you'll put that in.